Hello, my name is Gagne, and I am presenting on journals for this week's data collection. So the first question was, how would you describe data collection techniques? What processes and procedures are unique to this technique? I did a combined answer from both Mertzler and Mills, so I really like how Mertzler's broke it down into student, teacher, and class. There's these three different types of journals that can be written. So a student journal is when the student is actively reflecting on the day. This can be observations that they made, this can be about content that they learned, this can be about feelings about the content that they learned. Teacher is very similar. From their point of view, what happened in class, what behaviors were observed, how did the lesson go, and what were student reaction, and then what were your own personal feelings on this lesson. Class is a little bit different. Class is when there's one journal for the whole entire class, and it gets passed around from student to student. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but this is when the teacher needs to put in some sort of guidelines specifically, so that it's not just a kind of a parking lot for graffiti to take place, as Mertzler called it, of students just writing randomness within that. It needs to still be focused on what the intent of the journal is, and that is to reflect on the class as a whole. So this way we have a class of data instead of a student data. When we're looking at journaling, there's definitely a certain amount of data points depending on how many students are in your class. So for example, I have a class of 27 students in my vet science class. If I were to do this, I would have 27 different data points that I'm tracking every single day for these students. The teacher side is only one. Teacher side you can track for administration purposes as well. So as teachers are doing this, they're recording their observations and feelings. This can go ahead and provide the school in general, if these teachers are doing these journals, what the climate is at the high school or elementary or middle school that they are working in, which I find to be a really good use of those as well. Question, do you want to deal with qualitative versus quantitative data? So this is definitely a qualitative data. Students are going to be writing in here what they feel, what they observe, what they are learning. This goes ahead and allows the researcher, the teacher, to have a little bit of idea about what the student is learning and the progression of their learning. So we can say at our start of our unit, students were very confused about the concept. I'll use the example that I have right now of skin. They're not understanding the layers of the skin. We can see that the terminology is a little bit murky. We can see that students feel frustrated learning these new terminology, and that they are struggling to go ahead and label the skin ID. We can then go ahead and see, as we progress through this unit, how students are feeling. Are they feeling more confident with this terminology? Can they use the proper terminology? Are they able to identify parts on a skin diagram? So we can see the progression of learning that's taking place while the student is journaling. We also see how they're feeling. When they started this unit, they felt really frustrated and confused. Are they seeming to understand it and feeling more confident? Are they feeling more accepted? Can they see the connection to their own lives with the contents being taught? And we can go ahead and see that all from what the students are reflecting on. From the teacher point of view, this qualitative data can be thinking about behaviors in the classroom. This can be a million different ways taken for classroom management, putting in a new technique, whether that's a new policy for bathrooms, whether that's a new policy for students collecting their graded work or getting missing work back to them, engaging for inquiry-based instruction. I know my study here is going to be about case studies, so I can use something like this to see how students feel going through the case studies and how I observe students retaining information from the case studies and logically thinking through these case studies. And this also just allows for the themes to be sorted off. So with qualitative data, we a lot of times package these ideas into themes, so as all these data points are coming in, we can see common themes that students and teachers are having throughout the classroom experience. Some strengths and weaknesses. This is a very cut and dry. You're having students record their thoughts daily, teacher record their observations daily as a way to reflect on the lesson. So strengths-wise, you're getting multiple data points. We know that as you have more data points, you can go one way or another to see if this is if the hypothesis is tested or nulled. On another side to this, it's written data, and you can capture those bigger themes. So it's a little bit easier to group these concepts together as going through the data versus having to do some sort of statistical equation. Multiple methods of collecting data. So again, you can do a teacher journal, you can do the student journal, and then that class journal. The class journal needing to have a little bit more support. I would say probably for younger grades, that support in the student journal as well would be needed. Weaknesses then. So So making sure that students are focusing on that day. I would also say that if the student's absent frequently, like I have a student right now who comes 2 days a week to school, so they're absent 3 days a week, that student's data point, I'll talk a little bit later about validity of that, we're not going to be able to see consistency in that student, and we're going to see that that student is probably feeling a little bit more anxious, frustrated, confused, because we're not getting that daily instruction that their peers are getting. I also said just laying the groundwork to understand what's appropriate for this journal would be a weakness. So Mertzler talked a lot about graffiti being done in these class journals, of just students putting whatever they feel like in there and not actually pertaining to what the research study is about, again, of those feelings and observations and learning process that they are going through. So really trying to get students to understand the purpose of this without telling them exactly what to write. So they still have the freedom to share their own thoughts and opinions from their point of view of the class, but they're not going away from that either. Question number 4, related to the concerns that I have about data collection. Trust. Trust was mentioned again in the Mertzler reading, that when you have these more data points, you have this consistency, you can develop a sense of trust. What my students put in there the first week of journal collection versus week 4 will be very different. So having that relationship and that reflection period and that routine built in is going to increase the trust. But in the beginning, I would find that would be a concern of, are they taking this seriously? Is this something that I can actually use? Or are they writing what I think they want them to write? Or are they writing, yeah, this was great, and moving on? Validity is another concern of mine. So having students outside contributions coming into the classroom. We know that every student's home life is not perfect. For me, with block scheduling, they could have just gotten to really frustrated in math class before coming into my course, and now they're bringing that anger and frustration into my classroom, and that's going to affect their feelings and their behavior and how they perceive my course now if I ask them to read something and they were just struggling with reading in their last block. So I feel like when we looking at the feelings and observations that students are having, we have to consider that the outside factors that might be making that student feel something that day that then ends up in their journal. So if this is a consistent thing that we're seeing written in the journal, then we can go ahead and say that's probably valid. But if you have these couple data points here and there where the student was struggling, but from your journal you didn't feel like that student was struggling, I feel like that could be a validity issue within the data. Overall, journals are a great way to go ahead and just capture qualitative data of what is going on in the classroom from the student point of view, the teacher point of view, and then the class point of view. We can go ahead and use that data to get a baseline or capturing what how the school is doing as a whole, as the class is doing as a whole, and how students are progressing through their learning. Thank you for listening.